Marcus Rivera stared at the assignment roster displayed on his datapad, reading it for the fourth time in as many minutes. The words hadn't changed, but he kept hoping they might rearrange themselves into something less nerve-wracking. Communications Specialist Marcus Rivera, Quarters 7C roommate. Zephora of the Nexari Collective. The stellar horizon hummed steadily around him as it drifted through the Kepler system. Its research mission now expanded to include the first extended cultural exchange with the enigmatic Nexari. Marcus had volunteered for the program, eager to be part of this historic moment. What he hadn't expected was to be sharing living quarters with one of them. He'd seen the Nexari delegation. During their arrival ceremony 3 days ago, they were humanoid but taller than most humans, with smooth skin that seemed to shimmer with embedded crystalline formations. Their movements were fluid, almost dance-like, and their large eyes held an intelligence that seemed both ancient and curious. Beautiful, certainly, but utterly alien. Marcus made his way through the ship's corridors, toward the quarters deck, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. The diplomatic briefings had been thorough about Nexari customs regarding food, language, and social hierarchy, but remarkably vague about their living arrangements. Cultural adaptation in progress, the files had stated unhelpfully. Quarter 7C was larger than standard crew accommodations, featuring 2 sleeping alcoves separated by a common area with a small desk and seating arrangement. The lighting was dimmer than usual, adjusted for Nexari preferences. As Marcus palmed the entry sensor, the door slid open with a soft hiss. She was already there. Zephora stood near the far alcove, her back to him, as she arranged what appeared to be personal belongings. She was tall, perhaps 6.5 feet, with skin the color of moonlight. Crystalline patches along her arms and neck pulsed with a gentle blue-white glow, creating patterns that seemed to shift as she moved. Her hair, if it could be called that, looked more like silver fiber optics, catching and reflecting the ambient light. "Hello," Marcus said, setting his bag down carefully. "I'm Marcus Rivera." Zephora turned, and Marcus found himself momentarily breathless. Her face was elegant, with high cheekbones and eyes that were larger than human normal, colored like deep ocean water with flecks of silver. When she looked at him, those crystalline patches on her skin brightened noticeably. "Rivera," she repeated, her voice carrying a musical quality that made his name sound like a melody. "I am called Zephora. We are to be nest companions." "Roommates," Marcus corrected gently. "We call them roommates," her head tilted slightly, a gesture that somehow managed to be both bird-like and graceful. "Roommates," she agreed. "This word means the same? We share rest space?" "Yes, exactly." Marcus moved to the other alcove, noting that it had been fitted with a standard human sleeping pad. "We each have our own sleeping area, and we share the common space." Zephora's crystalline patches dimmed slightly, and she moved closer to examine his alcove. "These are very far apart," she observed, concern evident in her musical voice. "Well, it gives us privacy," Marcus explained, beginning to unpack his belongings. "Humans generally prefer to sleep alone, unless they're, in a relationship." "Relationship," Zephora repeated the word slowly, as if testing its weight. "You mean reproductive bonding?" Arcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Not necessarily. Reproductive, sometimes romantic, sometimes just close friendship. Point is, most humans like their own space when they sleep." Zephora was quiet for several minutes as Marcus continued unpacking. He arranged his few personal items, a photo of his family back on Earth, a well-worn book of poetry, and a small plant cutting in a hydroponic container. When he turned around, he found her watching him with those large, luminous eyes. "Rivera," she said formally, "I must inform you of a necessity regarding rest cycles." "Okay," Marcus replied, settling into one of the chairs. "What kind of necessity?" "My species requires physical proximity during sleep periods." "Not for reproductive purposes," she added quickly, "but for neural regulation. Without proper thermal and electromagnetic contact, we experience what you might call nightmares, but which persist even when awake." Marcus blinked, processing this information. How close is close proximity? Instead of answering with words, Zephora moved to his sleeping alcove, and gracefully lowered herself onto the sleeping pad. She then looked at him expectantly, patting the space beside her. "You want to sleep in the same bed?" Marcus asked, his voice climbing slightly in pitch. "Not want," Zephora corrected. "Need your species generates bioelectric fields that are compatible with ours? Is why the exchange program is possible." Marcus stared at her, realizing that all those diplomatic briefings had somehow failed to mention this rather crucial detail. "And if I say no?" Zephyr's crystalline patches flickered, rapidly, then dimmed to almost nothing. "Then I will not sleep. After several cycles, I will become unstable. Eventually, I will need to return to my ship." The disappointment in her voice was unmistakable. Marcus looked at this elegant alien being who had somehow become his responsibility, and felt something shift in his chest. The mission was important, not just for science, but for the future of both species. And she wasn't asking for anything inappropriate, just companionship during sleep. "All right," he said finally. "We'll figure it out." Zephyr's entire body seemed to brighten, her crystalline patches pulsing with soft, warm light. Nespawn? Marcus couldn't help but smile. "I accept being roommates. Good roommates." That night, as the ship's lights dimmed to simulate evening, Kusa found himself lying rigid on his sleeping pad, while Zephora curled around him like a living blanket. Her skin was warm, and the gentle pulsing of her crystalline patches created a soothing rhythm. Despite his initial nervousness, he found the experience oddly comforting. "Thank you, Marcus Rivera," she whispered as her breathing began to slow. "Just Marcus is fine," he replied softly. "Thank you, just Marcus," she murmured. And he could swear he heard amusement in her voice as sleep took him. Marcus realized that this mission was going to be far more interesting than he'd ever imagined. Tobias Grant had always prided himself on being adaptable. 3 tours on deep space mining vessels, 2 years on the Frontier Research Station at Wolf 359, and countless nights sleeping in zero-G had taught him to roll with whatever the universe threw at him. But nothing had prepared him for Villani. His Nexari roommate stood in the center of their shared quarters, her crystalline patches cycling through what Tobias had learned were emotional indicators. Currently a deep amber that meant confusion, or distress. She was smaller than most Nexari, perhaps only 6 feet tall, with skin that held a faint lavender tint, and hair fiber that cascaded down her back like liquid mercury. "You are troubled by the Nesbond," Villani stated, her voice carrying that characteristic musical quality all Nexari possessed. But with an undertone of sadness, Tobias ran a hand through his graying hair, trying to find the right words. At 42. He was one of the older crew members on the Stellar Horizon, and set in his ways. The first 3 nights of sharing sleep space with Villani had left him exhausted and on edge. "It's not that I'm troubled," he lied. "It's just ... different." Villani's patches shifted to a cooler blue skepticism. "Your biohydrums indicate stress. Sleep cycles are irregular. You are uncomfortable with my presence." The directness of Nexari communication could be jarring. They didn't lie or dissemble. Concepts that seemed foreign to their psychology. Tobias had learned this the hard way when he'd tried too politely deflect her questions about human mating rituals. "Look, Villani," Tobias said, settling heavily into one of the chairs. "Where I come from, sharing a bed with someone you barely know is ... intimate. It's something humans do with people they love, or at least people they're very close to." "But we are close," Villani replied, moving to sit across from him. Ashy. Her patches brightened slightly. We share breath space, warmth space, dream space. How can beings be closer than in sleep? Tobias found himself without an answer. In the mess hall that morning, he'd overheard other crew members discussing their own Nexari roommates. Engineer Patricia Vance had seemed perfectly content with her arrangement, while Communications Officer Torres had requested a room transfer after just 2 nights. The other humans, Villani continued, they are adapting differently. Some accept the nest bond with joy, others resist. Why do your species vary so greatly in this? Because we're individuals, Tobias explained. We all have different comfort levels, different histories, different needs. But the need for companionship is universal, Villani countered. On our world, isolation during rest cycles is a punishment reserved for the most severe crimes. To be alone in sleep is to be alone. With one's fears and failures, why would anyone choose such suffering? The conversation was interrupted by the ship's communication system crackling to life. All personnel to stations. We're approaching the Kepler 442 system. Prepare for deep space scanning operations. As they both rose to leave for their shifts, Villani placed a gentle hand on Tobias's arm. Her touch was warm, and he could feel the faint electrical current that ran through her crystalline formations. Tonight, she said, perhaps you could explain more about human fear of closeness. I wish to understand. During his shift in the engine room, Tobias found himself thinking about Villani's words. He'd been married once, back on Earth, but that had ended badly when his wife couldn't handle his long assignments in space. Since then, he'd grown comfortable with solitude, preferring the predictable hum of machinery to the complications of human relationships. But Villani wasn't asking for a relationship in any human sense. She needed something more basic, the simple presence of another living being to quiet the fears that haunted her species in the dark. Was his discomfort really about boundaries, or was it about something deeper? That evening, Chief Medical Officer Santos stopped by their quarters during his rounds. Dr. Santos was conducting wellness checks on all the human Nexari partnerships, documenting both the successes and the challenges. How are you adjusting, Grant? Santos asked, his scanner recording Tobias's vital signs. It's a process, Tobias admitted. Santos nodded knowingly. You're not the only one struggling. About 30% of the crew has requested transfers or modifications to the arrangement. But the interesting thing is, the ones who stick with it report better sleep quality than they've had in years. After Santos left, Tobias found himself alone with Villani in the quiet of their quarters. She was working on something at the small desk, a intricate geometric pattern made from what looked like crystallized light. What are you making? He asked. A harmony map, she replied without looking up. It represents the bioelectric frequencies between nest mates. Each successful bond creates a unique pattern. Tobias moved closer to look at her work. The pattern was beautiful, like a mandala made of light and mathematics. What does ours look like? Villani's patch is dimmed, complete. There are gaps where your resistance creates dissonance. The honesty of her statement hit him harder than he expected. Being this person was trying to create something beautiful from their connection, and his own hang-ups were preventing it from forming properly. Villani, he said quietly, tell me about your world, about why you need this. She set down her work and looked at him with those large, luminous eyes. My planet orbits a binary star system. The nights are long and filled with electromagnetic storms that interfere with our natural neural patterns. For millions of years, we survived by clustering together, sharing our bioelectric fields to maintain mental stability, and now we live in cities with technological protection, but the need remains encoded in our genetics. Without a nestmate, we experience what you might call waking nightmares, visions of loss, abandonment, death. It is unbearable. Tobias felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't about cultural differences or personal boundaries. This was about survival, about a fundamental need as basic as food or water. When I was young, he said slowly, I was afraid of the dark. My mother used to sit by my bed until I fell asleep. Villani's patches brightened with interest. And this helped? It helped. It's just knowing someone was there, someone who cared enough to stay. That night, when the ship's lights dimmed and they prepared for sleep, Tobias didn't tense up when Villani curled against him. Instead, he thought about a frightened child and a patient mother, about the universal need for comfort in the darkness. Tobias, Villani whispered as her breathing began to slow. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for helping me remember." He replied as sleep took them both. Tobias realized that sometimes the most profound connections came not from similarity, but from recognizing the same fundamental needs across the vast differences between worlds. Dr. Evelyn Cross had spent 15 years studying xenobiology. But nothing in her academic career had prepared her for living with a Nexari. Her roommate Kira was a scientist herself, a specialist in what the Nexari called consciousness harmonics, and their quarters had quickly become an unofficial laboratory for interspecies research. Evelyn sat at her workstation, reviewing the data she'd collected over the past 2 weeks. Bioelectric field measurements, neural activity scans, hormone level fluctuations, all painting a picture of something far more complex than simple cultural preference. "Your findings are incomplete," Kira observed from where she lay on their shared sleeping platform. Unlike the human crew members who seemed to struggle with the arrangement, Evelyn had embraced the research opportunity immediately. "You measure the surface phenomena, but not the deeper harmonics." Kira was perhaps the most striking Nexari Evelyn had encountered. Her crystalline formations were more extensive than most, creating intricate patterns across her arms, neck, and face that pulsed with complex rhythms. Her skin held an opalescent quality that shifted between blue and green depending on the light, and her hair fibers seemed to respond to her emotions, brightening when she was excited about a particular discovery. "Then show me," Evelyn said, holding up her portable scanner. "Help me understand what I'm missing." Kira rose gracefully and moved to sit beside Evelyn at the workstation. As she did, the crystalline patterns on her skin began to pulse in a slow, steady rhythm. "Place your hand against mine," she instructed. Evelyn pressed her palm against Kira's, and immediately her scanner began registering readings she'd never seen before. The Nexari's bioelectric field wasn't just present, Tit was actively synchronizing with her own neural patterns. "Fascinating," Evelyn breathed, watching the data scroll across her screen. "Your nervous system is actually adapting to match mine." "Not adapting," Kira corrected. "Harmonizing. My species evolved alongside creatures we called warm minds, beings whose neural patterns naturally complemented our own. When we sleep together, our consciousness frequencies align, creating what you might call a shared dream space." Evelyn leaned forward, intrigued. "Shared dreams? Are you saying you can actually access each other's subconscious?" "Not access." Kira's voice took on the patient tone she used when explaining complex concepts. "Stabilize. Alone, our minds tend toward chaos during rest cycles. With a compatible partner, we achieve what we call thoughtful peace." The implications were staggering. Evelyn began pulling up her research files, cross-referencing Kira's explanations with her own observations. The data supported everything the Nexari was saying during their shared sleep periods. Both their brain patterns showed remarkable stability and coherence. "But why humans specifically?" Evelyn asked. "What makes us compatible?" Kira's crystalline patterns shifted to a warm gold. What Evelyn had learned indicated intellectual excitement. "Your species has what we call emotional resonance. Most beings we have encountered think in linear patterns, but humans think in emotional harmonies. Fear, joy, curiosity, love, these create neural frequencies that blend naturally with our own." A soft chime indicated someone at their door. Evelyn opened it to find Dr. Santos, the ship's medical officer, along with Commander Reeves, the Stellar Horizon's first officer. "Dr. Cross," Commander Reeves said, "we understand you've been conducting research on the human-Nexari partnerships. We need to discuss your findings." Evelyn invited them in, noting how both officers' eyes were drawn to Kira, who remained seated at the workstation, with her patterns still glowing softly. "We've had several crew members request room transfers," Dr. Santos explained. "Some are reporting anxiety, sleep disturbances, and in 2 cases, what appear to be panic attacks. We need to know if there are medical contraindications we should be aware of. Actually, Evelyn said, pulling up her data on the room's main display, my research suggests the opposite. Humans paired with Nexari show improved REM sleep, decreased cortisol levels, and enhanced neural recovery during rest periods. Then why are some crew members struggling? Commander Reeves asked. QIRA spoke up, her musical voice carrying a note of what sounded like sadness. Not all humans are compatible. Some minds are too rigid, too fearful of connection. Others have suffered trauma that makes harmony difficult to achieve. Evelyn nodded, highlighting specific data points. I've been analyzing the successful partnerships versus the unsuccessful ones. The humans who adapt well tend to score higher on empathy assessments, have experience with meditation or similar practices, and show greater comfort with physical affection. And the ones who don't adapt? Dr. Santos asked. Often have histories of anxiety disorders, trust issues, or what we might call hyperindependence, Evelyn replied. It's not a failing, it's just incompatibility. Commander Reeves frowned. So we're looking at roughly a 70% success rate? Better than that, Evelyn corrected. 82% of partnerships are showing positive outcomes. The key is proper matching based on psychological profiles rather than random assignment. After the officers left, Evelyn found herself alone with Kira again. The Nexari had moved to their sleeping area and was arranging what looked like crystalline meditation stones in a specific pattern. You didn't tell them about the deeper connections, Kira observed without looking up. What deeper connections? Evelyn asked, though she suspected she knew. The ones you experience when we sleep, the sharing of memory echoes, the blending of emotional landscapes. You study it, but you also live it. Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks. It was true over the past 2 weeks. She'd begun to experience something that went beyond simple companionship. During their shared rest periods, she sometimes caught glimpses of Kira's memories, felt echoes of emotions that weren't entirely her own. Is it dangerous? She asked. Only if you resist it, Kira replied, finally looking up with those luminous eyes. Your species fears vulnerability, but connection requires the courage to be truly seen. That night, as they settled into their shared sleeping space, Evelyn didn't focus on her scanners or data collection. Instead, she allowed herself to simply experience the phenomenon she'd been studying. As Kira's warmth surrounded her and their breathing synchronized, she felt her consciousness expand in ways she'd never imagined possible. In the space between sleep and waking, she saw glimpses of Kira's world-vast cities of living crystal. Beneath binary suns, beings who communicated through harmonics of light and emotion, and somehow she knew that Kira was seeing pieces of her own memories in return to the excitement of her first microscope, the loneliness of long research assignments, the deep satisfaction of understanding how life worked at its most fundamental levels. This is why the exchange program matters, Kira whispered in the darkness. Not just for science or diplomacy, but for evolution. Both our species are incomplete alone. Evelyn drifted into sleep, thinking that perhaps the most important discoveries weren't always found in laboratories, but in the brave willingness to connect with another conscious being, no matter how different they might seem. Captain Helena Ward stood in her ready room, staring out at the starfield beyond while nursing her third cup of coffee in as many hours. The reports scattered across her desk painted a picture of growing tension aboard the stellar horizon, and, as a commanding officer, the weight of every decision fell squarely on her shoulders. The door chimed, and her first officer, Commander Blake, entered with yet another datapad. Captain, we've got 14 more requests for room reassignments. That brings our total to 37 crew members requesting alternative arrangements. Helena turned from the viewport, her weathered face reflecting the stress of command. At 51, she'd commanded 3 deep space vessels and thought she'd seen every possible challenge the void could throw at her. The human-Nexari cultural exchange, however, was testing her leadership in ways she'd never anticipated. How many successful partnerships do we still have? She asked, accepting the datapad. 68 stable pairings out of the original 105, Commander Blake replied. Dr. Cross's compatibility assessments have helped, but we're still dealing with crew members who feel coerced into intimate situations. The word intimate hung heavy in the air. Helena understood the concern asking her crew to share sleeping quarters with alien beings was unprecedented. And the Nexori's need for physical closeness during rest cycles had created a diplomatic minefield. Captain Blake continued. There's also the matter of the upcoming Nexari delegation. Admiral Chen's office has confirmed that 3 Nexari vessels will be arriving within 48 hours. They're expecting to see a successful integration program. Helena rubbed her temples. The pressure from Earth Command was immense as exchange program represented humanity's first attempt at extended cooperation with a truly alien intelligence. Success could mean new technologies, expanded exploration opportunities, and perhaps, most importantly, proof that humans could work alongside non-human species. Failure could set back Xena diplomacy by decades. What's the status of crew morale among the successful partnerships? She asked. Surprisingly positive, Blake admitted. Those who've adapted report improved sleep quality, reduced anxiety, and several have mentioned feeling more ... connected to their work and colleagues. The captain's contemplation was interrupted by her communication system. Captain Ward to the bridge immediately. Priority 1. Helena exchanged glances with Blake before heading to the bridge. Lieutenant Rodriguez, her communications officer, looked up from his station with barely contained excitement. Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from the mining colony on Keplera 44 to C. Their primary reactor is experiencing cascading failures. They have maybe 18 hours before life support fails completely. Helena felt the familiar rush of command decisions crystallizing in her mind. How many people? 237 colonists, Captain. The nearest rescue vessel is the Aurora, but she's 6 days out, and us could reach them in 14 hours if we push our engines. But Rodriguez hesitated. It would mean diverting from our rendezvous with the Nexari fleet. Helena closed her eyes for a moment, weighing the impossible choice. Abandon the critical diplomatic mission to save lives, or maintain the rendezvous and hope the colonists could hold out until other help arrived. Captain, came a new voice. Helena turned to see Zane, one of the senior Nexori advisors, approaching the bridge with his characteristic fluid grace. His crystalline formations were pulsing in rapid patterns. What she'd learned indicated urgent communication. The Nexari fleet has received the distress signal as well, Zane announced. We propose a joint rescue operation. Your vessel has the medical facilities and evacuation capacity. Our ships have the advanced power systems needed to stabilize their reactor. Helena felt a surge of hope. Would your people be willing to delay the formal exchange ceremonies? Lives transcend ceremonies, Zane replied, his pattern shifting to what Helena recognized as resolute determination. It is what nestmates do. They respond to crisis together. The next several hours became a carefully orchestrated dance of cooperation. The Stellar Horizon adjusted course for the mining colony while the 3 Nexari vessels moved to intercept their trajectory. Helena found herself working more closely with Nexari command staff than she'd ever imagined possible. But the crisis also exposed the tensions aboard her own ship. As they prepared for evacuation procedures, several crew members who'd requested room transfers began voicing concerns about working alongside their Nexari roommates in emergency situations. I can't focus with her touching me all the time, complained Engineer Torres during a department briefing. How am I supposed to run critical repairs when I'm worried about my personal space? She doesn't touch you to make you uncomfortable, replied Dr. Cross, who'd become something of an advocate for the exchange program. Kira explained that Nexari sometimes extend comfort through contact when they sense stress. I didn't ask for comfort, Torres shot back. I asked for a roommate, not a therapy alien. The argument might have escalated, but it was interrupted by an emergency alert. The mining colony's reactor had failed sooner than predicted. They now had less than 12 hours. Before life support would be compromised, Helena made the decision to push their engines beyond safe parameters. As the ship shuddered under the strain of excessive speed, she noticed something remarkable happening among her crew. The successful human-Nexari partnerships began working together with an efficiency she'd never seen before in the engine room. Chief Petty Officer Garcia and his Nexari partner, Dizal's coordinated repairs with an almost telepathic understanding. In medical, Dr. Santos and Nexari healer Valen prepared emergency triage protocols while maintaining a constant, calming contact that seemed to steady both of them. Most remarkably, she observed her own growing partnership with Zane. Though they didn't share sleeping quarters command protocol, prevented that their working relationship had developed an intuitive quality that transcended language barriers. Captain Zane said during one particularly intense planning session, "Your distress patterns indicate excessive responsibility burden." In Nexari culture, command is shared among pod leaders. In human culture, Helena replied with a tired smile, "The captain goes down with the ship." "Then it is fortunate we do not plan to sink," Zane replied. And Helena realized he'd just made a joke, something she hadn't expected from the formal Nexari advisor. As the stellar horizon and the Nexari fleet approached the mining colony, Helena stood on her bridge surrounded by both human and Nexari officers working in seamless cooperation. The crew members who'd initially resisted the partnership program were now seeing it in action during a genuine crisis. The captain, communications reported, "The colony is responding. Their reactor is stable, and life support is holding. The Nexari ships have successfully transferred power." Helena felt a surge of pride not just in her crew, but in what they had accomplished together. The rescue operation had required the unique capabilities of both species working in perfect coordination. "All crew members," she announced over the ship's communication system, "prepare for evacuation procedures. We have 237 lives depending on us getting this right." As her crew, human and Nexari alike, moved with practiced efficiency to save the mining colony, Helena realized that the real success of the exchange program wasn't measured in comfortable sleeping arrangements or diplomatic protocols. It was measured in moments like this. When two species could face the universe's challenges as genuine partners, the crisis had revealed something profound. When survival was at stake, the barriers between species seemed almost trivially small. James Chen had always believed that healing was about more than medicine. It was about understanding the whole person, their fears, their hopes, their connections to others. As the Stellar Horizons nurse practitioner, he'd spent countless hours listening to crew members struggling with homesickness, relationship troubles, and the psychological challenges of deep space travel. What he hadn't expected was to find his own definition of healing completely transformed by his partnership with Nasara. His Nexari roommate wasn't just a cultural exchange participant, she was a healer in her own right, practicing what she called consciousness mending. Where James worked with medications, sutures, traditional medical interventions, Nasara worked with something far more subtle. The delicate harmonics of living beings, bioelectric fields. "The human crew member Torres is coming to see you." "Again today," Nisara observed as they prepared for their respective shifts. The crystalline formations were cycling through gentle green patterns. "What?" James had learned an indicated professional concern mixed with personal affection. James nodded, reviewing his patient notes. Engineer Torres had been one of the crew members struggling most with the Nexari partnership program. And the stress was manifesting in chronic insomnia, anxiety, and tension headaches. Traditional medications weren't helping much. "She fears..." Connection, Nisara continued, moving to stand beside James at their small medical preparation area. But her biohythms indicate a deep loneliness. It is a contradiction that causes internal dissonance. Over the past 3 weeks, James had begun to see his patients through Nasara's perspective as well as his own. The Nexari healer could sense things that his medical scanners missed: emotional wounds, psychological barriers, the complex interplay between mind and body that human medicine sometimes overlooked. "Would you be willing to help with her session?" Today, James asked. It had become their informal practice. James would handle the medical intervention while Nasara provided what she called harmony guidance. Nasara's patterns shifted to warm gold. "It would be my honor, Nessmate." The word still sent a small thrill through James. Unlike some of his colleagues who struggled with the terminology, he'd embraced it. At 34, he'd had his share of relationships, but none had felt as naturally supportive as his partnership with Nasara. They complemented each other in ways that went beyond mere compatibility. She helped him see healing from an entirely new perspective. her with insights into human psychology and physiology. Torres arrived at the medical bay looking exactly as stressed as James expected. The engineer was normally confident and outspoken, but weeks of poor sleep and cultural friction had left her looking exhausted and on edge. "Doc, I need something stronger," she said without preamble. "The sleep aids aren't working, and I can't keep going like this." James gestured for her to sit on the examination table. "Before we increase medication, I'd like to try a different approach. Torres, meet Nisara. She's been working with me on some alternative healing techniques." Torres looked skeptical as the tall Nexari approached. "No offense, but I've had enough of alien techniques." "I understand your hesitation," Nisara said, her voice carrying that characteristic musical quality, but modulated to be as non-threatening as possible. "But perhaps you would allow me to simply observe while James conducts your examination?" As James ran his medical scans, Nisara stood quietly nearby, her crystalline patterns cycling through subtle observation modes. Torres seemed to relax slightly despite herself. There was something inherently calming about the Nexari's presence. "Your cortisol levels are extremely elevated," James observed, reviewing the scanner results. "Your neural activity shows classic signs of hypervigilance. More concerning, your REM sleep has been almost completely suppressed for weeks." "I know I'm a mess," Torres admitted. "I just can't shut my brain off. Every time I try to sleep, I keep thinking about her wanting to curl up next to me. It makes me feel claustrophobic." Nisara spoke softly. "May I share something about my own fears?" Torres looked surprised but nodded. "When I first learned I would be partnered with a human," Nisara continued, "I was terrified. Your species is so ... individual, so separate. On my world, we are never truly alone, even in our own minds. The thought of sleeping beside someone who couldn't share the dream space felt like being trapped in isolation." "But that's different," Torres protested. "You need the contact. I'm just supposed to accommodate it, are you?" James interjected gently. "Torres, when was the last time you felt genuinely rested? Not just physically, but emotionally." Torres was quiet for a long moment. I can't remember. Months, maybe?" "What if," Nisara suggested, "instead of seeing the nest bond as something imposed upon you, you saw it as healing? Not for me, but for you?" James pulled up Torres's psychological profile. "You've been on solo assignments for 3 years running, extended isolation, minimal personal connections. Torres, you're not suffering from alien contact. Anxiety or suffering from chronic loneliness." The engineer's eyes widened as if she'd been struck. That's not." "It's okay," James said gently. "Loneliness isn't a weakness. It's a very human need for connection that we sometimes suppress because it feels vulnerable." Nisara moved closer, her patterns shifting to soft, comforting blues. "Your Nexari partner, Kethshi, is not trying to invade your space. She's offering to share warmth and peace, not because you're weak, but because connection makes all beings stronger." Over the next hour, James and Nisara worked together to help Torres understand the difference between invasion and invitation. They explored relaxation techniques, boundary-setting exercises, and most importantly, reframing the nest bond as a form of mutual support rather than one-sided accommodation. "What if we started with just sharing the same room?" James suggested. "Separate beds, but in the same space. Let yourself get used to companionship without feeling pressured into physical contact." Torres nodded slowly. Then you see how it feels," Nisara replied. "Connection cannot be forced, but it can be chosen." After Torres left, looking more hopeful than she had in weeks, James found himself alone with Nisara in the quiet medical bay. "You were remarkable with her," he said, reviewing his notes from the session. Nisara's patterns brightened with what James had learned was pleasure mixed with affection. "We were remarkable together. Your medical knowledge and my harmony, sensing, create something neither could achieve alone." James looked at this amazing being who had become so central to his life and work. "Nisara, can I ask you something personal?" "All questions between nestmates are personal," she replied with what James was certain was amusement. "Do you see us as just a temporary partnership? Something that ends when the cultural exchange is over?" Nasara was quiet for several moments. Her crystalline formations cycling through complex patterns, James was still learning to read. Finally, she spoke. On my world, nest bonds are not temporary unless one partner chooses to leave. They are chosen commitments to share warmth, dreams, and growth. She moved closer to him. James Chen, you have become more than my assigned partner. You have become my chosen companion. James felt something profound shift in his chest. And when this mission ends, then we will find a way to continue our bond, whether on your world, mine, or among the stars. Her patterns pulsed with warm gold. Is this your wish as well? James reached out to touch her hand, feeling the familiar tingle of her bioelectric field synchronizing with his own. It is. That evening, as the ship's lights dimmed and they settled into their shared sleeping space, James reflected on how much his life had changed. He'd become not just a better healer, but a better human through his connection with Nasara. Around the ship, he knew other partnerships were finding their own balance. Some crew members were still struggling, but increasingly, the successful bonds were becoming models for the rest. Captain Ward had even issued new protocols based on Dr. Cross's research, allowing for gradual integration and voluntary participation rather than mandatory assignments. The stellar horizon was becoming something unprecedented in human space. Exploration, a truly integrated vessel where two species worked and lived together as equals. It wasn't always easy, and it wasn't always comfortable, but it was something remarkable. Proof that consciousness could transcend the boundaries of biology, that healing and growth could happen across the vast differences between worlds. James Nasara whispered as sleep began to take them. Thank you for teaching me that healing is not just about fixing what is broken, but about nurturing what can grow. Thank you, James replied, for teaching me that sometimes the best medicine is simply not being alone. As the stellar horizon continued its journey through the cosmos, two species learned together that the universe was far less lonely when you had someone to share it with. Regardless of how many stars separated your homeworlds,